They say history remembers the victors, but it never forgets the ones who died loudly. The ones whose final breath was so unbelievable, so terrifying, or so heroic that the world had no choice but to carve their names into time. Some deaths shake empires. Some deaths save nations. And some deaths are so absurd, so poetic, or so insane that even centuries later, people whisper, there's no way that actually happened. But it did. And tonight, you and I are stepping into those final moments. 5 people whose deaths were so epic, so unforgettable, that they became bigger than their lives. Listen closely, because these aren't stories about how they lived. These are stories about how they fell. There is a strange silence that fills the world right before a great death. A silence heavy enough to make even kings hold their breath. History turns toward a single person, as if the universe pauses just to watch what they will do next. And when that moment comes, that moment when their fate erupts, the silence explodes into legend.
The first story begins on a burning battlefield where a man stands surrounded by enemies, blood in his mouth, and a message that must reach his city, even if it kills him. Because it will, and because he knows it. First epic death story, the runner who died delivering victory. His name was lost to centuries until scholars found it again. Phidipides, the messenger of ancient Athens. The Persians had invaded, the Greeks were outnumbered, and the entire future of Athens hung by a single thread, the Battle of Marathon. Imagine this, dust clouds rising from thousands of marching soldiers, metal clashing so loudly it cracks the sky, the air thick with sweat, blood, and fear. When the battle ended, the unthinkable happened. The Greeks won. But victory meant nothing if Athens didn't know in time, because the Persians had sent ships toward the city to trick them into surrender.
Someone needed to run, fast, now. The distance? 40 kilometers. The heat? Merciless. And Phidipides, already exhausted from fighting. But he ran anyway. He ran until his bones screamed. He ran until the veins in his legs felt like snapping rope. He ran with nothing left except the knowledge that if he fell, his people would fall with him. He reached Athens, burst into the assembly, collapsed to his knees, and with the last breath in his lungs whispered, "We have won." Then he died where he kneels. And because of that moment, because of his death, the world created the marathon. Runners still retrace his final steps, but none will ever match the men who died finishing the first one.
Great deaths don't always happen to heroes. Sometimes they happen to kings. And sometimes that king goes out in a way so bizarre, it sounds like a joke the universe played on him. Which brings us to the second epic death story. A death so absurd that historians still argue whether it was fate or cosmic humor. Second epic death story, the king killed by his own joke. Ancient Greece again. A king named Draco. Stern, powerful, admired. One day, he entered a theater, extravagant, filled with thousands. People adored him. And in ancient tradition, showing devotion meant throwing cloths, robes, cloaks, tunics toward a leader they loved. Draco walked onto the stage. The crowd rose like a wave. And then it happened. One person threw their cloak, then another, then a dozen, then hundreds. Cloaks rained from the balconies, robes stacked on the stage. The audience became wild. And poor Draco? He disappeared under the mountain of fabric. Suffocated. To death. Killed not by enemies, not by conspirators, but by the very people who loved him too much.
Imagine that. A king crushed under a tsunami of affection, his final moment swallowed in soft cloth. History calls it death by popularity, a ridiculous, almost comedic fate, but unforgettable. The third epic death story isn't funny. It isn't heroic. It's something else entirely. A death so insane, so explosive, that it shook the entire ancient world. It begins in the palace of a ruler who believed he was untouchable, right up until the moment he wasn't. Third epic death story. The emperor who took the world down with him. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the man who built the Great Wall, unified China, and ruled with an iron fist. He feared death more than anything, feared it so deeply that he ordered alchemists to search for immortality. And what did they give him? Mercury. Toxic, shimmering, deadly mercury. As a medicine. The emperor swallowed it every day. Slowly, the poison began its silent work. His mind frayed, his body twisted. He saw shadows that weren't there. He heard voices whispering from corners. He became paranoid, cruel, obsessed. One day, traveling through the mountains, the sickness finally took hold. He collapsed, shaking violently. His generals panicked, not because their ruler was dying, but because if the public discovered it, China would explode into chaos. So they hid his death. They placed his corpse inside a carriage. They surrounded it with carts full of fish to hide the smell. They continued marching as if he were alive. The most powerful emperor in Chinese history, the man who wanted to live forever, became a rotting secret dragged across the countryside. His death was ironic, tragic, and unforgettable. The emperor who chased immortality killed by the very elixir meant to save him. Some deaths change the world. Some deaths humiliate kings. But the next one? The next one turned a warrior into myth. Because this time, the hero knew he was walking toward death and chose it anyway. Fourth epic death story. The samurai who died standing. Feudal Japan. A warrior named Pori Mototada. He served under a powerful lord, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who one day entrusted him with an impossible task. Hold this castle for as long as you can, no matter what. Mototada knew the truth. He knew the enemy army was massive. He knew his garrison was small. He knew this wasn't a mission. It was a death sentence. But he accepted it. When the enemy surrounded the castle, Mototada gathered his men. He looked each one in the eyes and told them something both terrifying and beautiful. You will die today, but your death will buy time. Enough time for our Lord to survive. No panic, no trembling, only honor. The siege began. Fire arrows arced through the sky. Walls cracked. Men screamed, but Mototada stood firm, calm even as the world collapsed around him. When the enemy finally stormed the fortress, he did not run. He did not hide. He did not surrender. He performed seppuku, ritual suicide, not out of despair, but as the final act of loyalty. He died with dignity, sitting upright, a silent message to his enemies. You may kill my body, but not my duty. His sacrifice bought Ieyasu time,
time that helped him eventually unite Japan. Mototada's death wasn't just epic. It changed history. Now for the final story. The one that feels supernatural. The one people still argue about. Because this man's death didn't just make history, it defied it.
This is the story of a man who died by doing something so impossible that even modern scientists are stunned by it. Fifth epic death story, the man who laughed at fire. The year is 1633, Russia. A monk named Avakam, fierce, stubborn, unbreakable. He was a religious dissenter, constantly hunted by the authorities, beaten, imprisoned, exiled. But every time they tried to silence him, he grew louder. The Tsar had enough. They chained him, dragged him into a wooden cabin, and set it ablaze. Now, imagine this. The flames rising like angry gods, heat blasting the skin, the room glowing white hot. Most people would scream, beg, plea, try to escape. But Avakam?
He stood there, chained, burning, and he sang. He sang hymns until his voice broke. He sang as flames ate through the cabin walls. Witnesses said his voice echoed even when the roof collapsed. His death became legend, a man whose faith burned brighter than the fire consuming him. A man who died singing. Epic, terrifying, unforgettable, all of them. These 5 deaths, the messenger who ran himself to death, the king crushed by love, the emperor poisoned by immortality, the samurai who died honorably, the monk who sang in fire. Together, they paint a strange truth about humanity. We don't remember people because they lived perfectly. We remember them because their final moment shook the world. Some deaths feel like punishment. Some feel like destiny. Some feel like poetry. And some feel like the universe telling a story through a single human life. But every one of them, every ridiculous, heroic, painful, glorious, absurd ending proves one thing. Death is not the end of a person. It is the beginning of their legend. And as long as we keep telling these stories, as long as we keep remembering them, the people who died these epic deaths never truly die.